Hello and welcome back. We're going to talk about participles today. Participles are a type of verb. They are, to be very technical, a verbal adjective. It's like when you use a verb, an action word, to describe someone or something. So, today in this video, we're going to cover call participles. We're going to talk about both active and passive participles. In the next video, that's also a part of this chapter, where both videos will cover chapter 16, we'll talk about the infinitives, a different kind of verb. Infinitives in English are the form, for example, to go to the store, to want something, to have something, right? When we add the preposition to in front of a verb, in English we get the infinitive. There's a different way to signal infinitives in Hebrew, but we'll get to that in the next video. So today, active and passive participles. So do you remember adjectives, right? So if we say a great woman, we might say this right here, we have the indefinite article, a, and then we have the adjective, great, and then we have the noun, woman, a great woman. Remember, that is an attributive adjective. We just added the adjective to the noun. Great here is functioning as an adjective. We can also say a working woman, right? Someone who happens to be working right now, right? That we're using it to describe someone. So we're using the verb work to describe someone who's doing that action right now. In the same way, we might say a talking woman, or a jumping man, or a running kid, right? We might be able to use these verbs as describing words to describe someone who does them. And in that way, we are using a participle. So a participle is a verb, a word describing action, that we are using instead to describe a person or a thing that does that action. A participle is a verbal adjective. So here's what a participle looks like in English. Sleeping Beauty. The one who happens to be sleeping, right? That's the describing word. Or Chief Sitting Bull, the name of a famous Native American chief. The sitting is the action, right, that is describing this person. Well, it's really describing the bull. That is the name of the person. But in any event, a stimulating lecture, right? The verb to stimulate means to create a lot of sensation. So something that does something that creates sensation. It's an action word. It stimulates. But a stimulating lecture would be when someone talks, right? But in such a way that it creates this action. But you're not describing the action. You're describing. You're using that action to describe the lecture or the thing, right? So, of course, this right now is not a very stimulating lecture. Participles are not known to do that to people. But nonetheless, so here's some things you already know about participles. So last video, I talked about the word shafat or shofet. So shafat means to judge. Mishpat means justice. It is a noun formed by adding a mem to the front of this root. Mishpat means justice. Shafat means to judge, the verb. And this is shofet, which is really a noun, but we can use it to describe a noun. But this form right here, shofet, that means a judge. This is the participial form, actually. A judge in Hebrew, the way you say a judge. By the way, the book of Judges in Hebrew is shofatim. We added the im ending, the masculine plural noun ending, to get the book of Judges, right? So Judges is shofatim. The judge Deborah, right? Shofet. But this is a judging one who judges. So what we're really doing is taking that verb, we're putting it into the participial form, and then we're using it to describe someone and describe something that they do. And if that's the core of what they do, then they are a judge. Okay, so all to say, there are some other words like kohen that you might be familiar with. Kohen meaning priest, right? Lomaid is actually that word in the middle there is a teacher, one who teaches. But this basic pattern here. So these are all participles. So a priesting one is a priest, right? And you'll notice that there's this holum over our first radical and a tsere under our second radical. That is the participial pattern. The call active participle has a holum and then a tsere. The pattern is kotel. Remember, kof, tet, lamed is our basic paradigm or pattern verb that we use, onto which we put the patterns in order to show them. So kotel, this is what we would call this pattern, the kotel pattern, on this holum and then a tsere. So we can stick any root into this pattern and it will turn that root into a participle. So again, what you already know, judge, right? Shofet, the book of Judges, Shofetim. Judges, masculine plural, Shofetim. That's the name of the book, Judges, Shofetim. A judge, feminine singular. So Deborah actually would not be a Shofet because that's a masculine singular form of the participle. Here's the feminine singular participle, Shofetah, which makes sense, right? And judges, feminine plural, Shofetot. Okay, so this is what would be like if it was purely a noun, right? We would add a comma, say we would add an ot ending. It's a little bit different with participles, and we'll get to that little bit different pattern right now. Okay, so let's take our basic verb here, katal, that we use for all of our paradigms, just to show. So katal, here's if we want to put this root katal into our participial form for masculine singular, we'd have the holum and then the tsere, kotel. And then if we wanted to put it in masculine plural, we would have the eem ending. Notice we reduce our middle radical vowel. It's a tsere. It reduces when we add our ending. It's okay. You still have your holum over your first radical. That's the thing you hang your hat on. That's what you use to show to yourself this is a call active participle. We have a holum over our first radical. Holum over first radical is a marker of the call active participle. For the feminine singular form, it's a little bit unusual. That is, it's not a comma, it's hey. So this is what distinguishes this form from just being a noun form. We have our typical noun ending added to the masculine plural form, as you see kotolim, but here kotelet. This is a slightly different form. It's still a feminine ending. A tav ending can be a feminine ending, but it's not our comma, it's hey ending. And then we have our typical feminine plural noun ending, ot. Notice we use our noun endings except for the feminine singular ending, which is slightly different from what we might imagine. It's like, those two segals, so et, and et ending is, kotelet. We'll have a few examples right here. So for the root shamar, to like watch over something, right, to watch or keep. If I wanted to say a watching one, I would say shomer. And this would be a man, a masculine subject to is watching over something, a shomer. If I wanted to say lots of watching ones or guards, right, I would say shomerim. This is actually how you say guards, like if someone is guarding a bunch of other people, or a keeper, right? When Cain says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" he uses that word shomer. So in any event, a feminine singular form, so one who is keeping the law or something like that, shomeret, feminine subject who's keeping something, or many feminine subjects who are keeping a law or watching over or guarding something. So that would be a shomrot, the ones who are guarding. And that's how I translate, the ones who are guarding. So amad, the root amad, which means to stand. Omed would mean one who stands, a standing one, masculine singular form. Omedim, notice my masculine plural noun ending there, but with my holum over my first radical. My holum over my first radical is my form. That's what I hang my hat on. I say this makes it a call active participle. Omedet, notice my et ending there for feminine singular, and omedot for feminine plural. Standing ones who are standing. Here's this form, nafal, this verb which means to fall down, no fail. One who falls, nofalim, falling ones, nofelet, one who falls, feminine singular, and ones who are falling, nofalot. Or savav, which means to go around. Sovev, one who goes around. Sovavim, ones who go around. Sovevet, one who goes around. Sovavot, ones who go around. Now, of course, as you know, some weak roots mess up this pattern. You're not going to be tested on weak roots. Don't worry about memorizing these. I'm just showing them to you so that you aren't surprised at the end of the semester when we show you some of these weak roots. I'm just going to show you a couple right here. But the third hey verbs, when you add these endings, notice your masculine plural ending and your feminine plural ending, you just lose your hey. So here's the root ra'ah, which means to shepherd. to be a shepherd. So ro'eh is a shepherd. Ro'im would be ones who are shepherding, right? But notice you've lost your hey in the masculine plural form. You've lost your hey in the feminine plural form. So feminine shepherds, female shepherds, ro'ot, right? And masculine shepherds would be ro'im. All right, so another one that is a weak root that tends to mess things up are these middle vavs and yods. So bo, kum, seem, these verbs that have these middle yods or vavs. Notice that you just lose it. Sorry. Ba, ba'im, ba'a, ba'ot. They don't really look quite like the other ones. You've got your masculine plural and feminine plural endings. And actually, a typical feminine singular ending, you don't have the ending. You do not have to memorize this. It's going to point it out to you in the translation when this happens. Last week of class, we're gonna go come back and talk about this. But just know that these middle weeks tend to follow a different pattern. So again, we'll get to more of these later. So kum, kam, kamim, kama, kamot. When I see a kof and a mem together, I know it has something to do with getting up or arising. That's what this root means, kum, to arise, to stand up, to get up. But oftentimes it's a little bit hard to figure out what the exact pattern is because the middle weeks look so different. So forget about those middle weeks or forget about those weak forms for now. I'm just trying to implant some things into your brain that can come back later. But how do participles work? Well, here's how they work. Remember our adjectives? We could have a substantive adjective just by itself, like tov means good, like the good, the bad, and the ugly or something like that. Or like find the good or seek the good, right? That would just be tov by itself. Those are fairly rare for adjectives just by itself, hatov, the good. But mostly we talked about attributive and predicative adjectives, right? So attributive, the good man. So ha'ish hatov, the man, the good. Remember, attributive comes after and agrees in definiteness. And then we had the predicative, like the man is good. Oh, my slide's a little wrong here, but sorry, it's supposed to be ha'ish, tov ha'ish. Sorry, the tov comes first. Tov ha'ish, the adjective comes before. So predicative adjectives prefer to precede. So start over here, tov, and then ha'ish over here, right? So tov ha'ish, good is the man. Or the man is good in English. So remember, we can have our attributive and predicative. Now, substantive. You don't come across substantive adjectives very much in Hebrew. Something that's an adjective that just hangs out by itself, that's not attached in some way to a noun, either attributively or predicatively. But for participles, we do find this quite a lot, in fact. So if you ever see a participle just hanging out by itself and you can't figure out how it attaches to anything else, so like shofet, that might just mean like a judge. That's called a substantive use of the participle. It's just, that's what it is. It's describing a judge, a judging one. Remember that these participles are really like verbal adjectives, but if they're substantive, they end up functioning as nouns. So you got verbs, adjectives, and nouns all in the exact same word. It's amazing. But so just shofet, like a judge, right? A judging one. This is used to just name the person. Or like haro'eh, the shepherding one. Guess what that means? That means the shepherd. Or shomer. This is our remember, we have a holum over our first radical here. Now notice we have the definite article attached to the shepherd, right? Ha, ro'eh. Ro'eh is our root. Ha is the definite article. So you can attach definite articles to participles. But so here, shomer, remember shamar means to like watch over or keep. And here we have a holum over our first radical. A sheen there's a sheen with a holum, so it looks kind of like a sheen and a scene at the same time. But shomer, so that would be the one who is keeping or a keeper. How about ha yoshvim bihuda. Ha-yoshvim, the ones, we have an im ending and a ha at the beginning, right? So that's the ones who are dwelling, bihuda, in Yehuda, in Judah. Yehuda is how you say Judah in Hebrew. The ones who dwell in Judah, the ones who are dwelling in Judah, or it's often translated the inhabitants of Judah or the inhabitants in Judah. So ha-ba, this is our weak form here. This is a middle weak. This is the word bo. This is how it shows up when it shows up in participles. But the one coming, ba, shem, Yahweh, in And then Shem means name, in the name of Yahweh. Now, it looks like a name of Yahweh, but remember, Yahweh is definite, and Shem, if it occurs right before Yahweh, is going to be in construct to Yahweh. So in the name of the Lord, definiteness works its way back up the chain. So the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Those are substantive uses when the when the verbal adjective, the participle, just kind of stands by itself. The attributive usage, if you remember, like a great woman, that's attributive. We're attributing the adjective to a noun. Remember, attributives agree with the noun in gender and number, agree with the noun in definiteness, and always come after. So the good man, that's an attributive adjective. Ha'ish, hatov, it's coming after, it's agreeing in definiteness. The good men, that would be ha'anashim, ha'tovim. Remember, we agree in gender and number with the noun. The good woman, that would be ha'isha, ha'tova. We have our endings. And then the good women, remember, nashim is our plural for women. So ha-nashim, ha-tovot. We have a feminine ending on our adjective. I know this is a masculine ending on the end of women. Remember, it's a strange word. These very, very old words that don't follow the rules. That's nashim, the plural for women, is one of those. So we might say for a participle, we can have attributive participles as well. So the standing man, instead of ha'ish, hatov, would be ha'ish. The word for stand in Hebrew is amad, so ha'ish ha'omed. So the standing man, ha'ish ha'omed. Notice our cholam over our first radical for the root. Ha'ish ha'omed, the man, the standing one, the standing man. Or the standing men, ha'anashim ha'omedim. Or the standing woman, ha'isha ha'omedet. Remember our et ending, still have a holum over our first radical. Holum over the first radical, that means call active participle. The good women is ha-nashim ha-tovot. The standing women would be ha-nashim ha-omedot. So do you see how these are exactly the same grammatical pattern? That is, they come at, you can have the attributive use of the adjective and the attributive use of the participle. They come after, they agree in definiteness and in gender and in number, and they are attributive. We have a different vowel pattern because adjectives and participles have different vowels that go along with them. We have our holum over our first radical that is signaling a call active participle. All right, and attributive use of the participle. So, lave, shomea, we have a sneaky patak here because we have a final guttural, but don't pay attention to that. Pay attention to that holum over your first radical from shama. Shama means to hear. Shomea means one who hears. Lave means heart. So, a heart that hears. So we have our participle is coming after our noun, and it agrees in definiteness and in number and in gender. A heart, a listening one. That's attributive, a listening heart. Melech, Yoshev, king, and then one who is dwelling. Yashav means to dwell or to sit. Here we have a holum vav, which functions like a holum. So if you have a holum vav come right after your first radical, that's also a sign of a call active participle. So Melech Yoshev, a king, one who sits, or one who dwells. A king, when a king sits on something, that's like a metaphor for reigning, right? A king enthroned, right? So a king who sits or a king who reigns, you might even translate that. But HaMelech HaYoshev, HaMelech HaYoshev, the king, the sitting one. That would be the king who sits. Notice we have our definite article. Both of them have the definite article. They agree in definiteness. That is attributive. Remember, predicative usage. Predicate prefers to precede and does not agree in definiteness. So the man is good would be tov ha'ish. The woman is very good would be tova ha'isha, ma'od. Remember, ma'od means very, very much. The mares are beautiful. Ha'susot yafot. So remember, susot is the feminine version of horses, right? Mares, the mares. And then yafot, it's coming after. Remember, predicative prefers to precede, but it's possible for it to come after, but it doesn't agree indefiniteness here. So hasusot yafot. Yafot means beautiful. So hasusot yafot would, because it doesn't agree indefiniteness, the noun has the definite article, the adjective does not. So that would mean it has to be predicative. The mares are beautiful. Remember, predicative means we make a sentence out of it. We add a version of the verb to be in there. Is, are, something like that. Okay, so the man is keeping. We can use a predicative use of the participle. So instead of tov, meaning good, we're going to say keeping. Remember shamar? So shomer. Usually, the predicative participle comes after. It's a little bit different than adjectives in that way. But here, ha'ish shomer. Notice it does not agree indefiniteness. Ha'ish, the man. Shomer, a keeping one. So the man is keeping. Predicative participles usually follow the subject. That's different than the adjectives. But they still do not agree indefiniteness. They don't take the definite article ever if they're predicative. So the woman is coming. So remember, the woman is very good would be tova ha'isha ma'od. The woman is coming. Instead of tova, we would say ba'a. So ha'isha ba'a. And then the mares are beautiful. Instead of that, we say the mares are standing. Amad means to stand. Hasusot still means the mares or the horses. Hasusot omadot. We have our feminine plural ending ot. Note that tense is determined by context. How do we know if it is keeping, will keep, have kept? Participles are indefinite in terms of time. They don't tell us what time that these things have occurred or how they've happened. So you just have to figure it out by context. Your clues for your context are what makes sense in terms of the story that you are translating up to this point. So here are some examples of the predicative use of the participle. You can see here Yahweh, the name, and then over. Remember, avar is our root that Ivrit comes from, Hebrew comes from. So it's crossover. So here Yahweh is crossing over. Now, I mean, how do you know it's not Yahweh, like a crossing over Yahweh or something like that? Right, the attributive does tend to come after, and actually the predicative also tends to come after in Hebrew when it comes to the participle. But this makes a whole lot more sense as Yahweh is crossing over, is passing over. This is actually, like the idea of the Passover, right? Instead of Yahweh a passing over one or something. Okay, so this next example, Elohim Yodea. Elohim Yodea. So Elohim, that's God, and then Yodea. This comes from the root yada, which means to know. It's got a sneaky patak because it's got a third ayin, a third guttural. But here we really just have the holum and sere pattern, so Yodea. So this would be knowing, one who knows. So God is one who knows, or something like that, right? Here's another example. Ha'anashim omerim la Yahweh, or la Adonai. It might be somehow how many people pronounce this. But so, ha'anashim, the men, omerim, are saying la Yahweh, to Yahweh. So the men are saying to Yahweh, or the people, we might say, are saying to Yahweh. Although this is the kind of gender-specific word for man. But in any event, here, ha yordim el hayam. So yarad means to go down. So ha yordim would be the ones who are going down, and then el hayam, to the yam, to the sea. Kol kore. Kol means a voice, or it could mean thunder, but typically it means a voice. So a voice, and then kore, that verb kara means to call out or cry out or speak aloud. So a voice calling out. A voice is calling out.
So we have another type of participle that we can use in English, and that's a passive participle. So an active participle would be like a standing one, or one who stands, or the working woman. You know, those are examples of participles that are active in English. There are also passive participles, participles where the sort of one who the subject is actually the one who's receiving the action. So an active participle, like the man who is watching. The passive participle is the man who is being watched. Here's our little graphic that a student many years ago, before I started teaching Hebrew. This is from Chunliang Seao in his class at Princeton Seminary. Somebody drew these a long time ago, but here's the man who's watching and the man who's being watched. You know, the active and the passive, right? So in Hebrew, we can have these passive participles as well as these active participles. The man who's watching would be ha'ish, ha-shomer. Remember, shamar is to watch or keep. Ha'ish is the man. Ha-shomer, this is a attributive adjective, or attributive participle right here, because it agrees in definiteness and it comes after. So ha'ish, ha-shomer, the man, the watching one, or the man who is watching. And then we would say the man who is being watched. In Hebrew, that's ha'ish ha-shamur. Notice that that's our same root, shamar. The same shin, mem, resh is still there. It's right there on the page. Notice that we have a different vowel pattern to express passive rather than active participles. Notice that we have a long A under our first radical and a long U, a shurek, in between our second and third. Those shureks, those U vowels that get stuck in the middle of verbs, those are going to be, for the rest of our class, signs of passive verbs. When you see a shurek, a U vowel, stuck into the middle of a verb, you're looking at a passive form of a verb. So you may already know Baruch, if you have a Jewish friend, or you've attended a Jewish wedding, or you have been to a Passover Seder or something, you might have heard in Jewish prayers, they often begin with Baruch atah Adonai. Baruch means blessed. Also the name Baruch. It's Jeremiah's scribe. So Baruch. You might have heard of like Baruch Halpern is a Jewish biblical scholar today, or Baruch College is a Jewish college. So Baruch is this name which means blessed. Blessed one. Now notice that it has that A, barak, right, is to bless, our verb, barak. Baruch here has the long A under the first radical, and it has a shurek between the second and the third. That's the sign of that passive participle. So one who is blessed. So one who blesses is barak. One who is blessed is baruch. So ketuvim is something that you may know. There's three parts of the Bible according to the Jewish tradition. They don't have Old Testament, New Testament. They have Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. They call it the Tanakh. T for Torah, Ne for Nevi'im, and K for Ketuvim. Nevi'im means prophets. Nevi'im means prophets. And Ketuvim means the written things, the writings, like the Psalms, the Proverbs. Job goes in here. Esther, Ruth go in the writings according to the Jewish canonical tradition. Notice that we have that long U, that shurek, stuck in the middle of our root. Katav means to write. Ketuv means written. And here ketuvim, the things that are written. Notice we have our plural ending there, our im ending. So just like active participles, passive participles can take these noun endings to show you that they are plural. These are passive participles. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, teaching you all about the ins and outs of passive participles. They occur. They're not terribly common, but we'll get more to passive verbs later. The most important of the passive verbs is called the nifal, which is a pattern that we'll get to in a little over a week. So passive participles. What's this pattern? Notice all of these: shamur, baruch, katuv, yadua. All of these have a long A under our first radical and a shurek in between, a long U in between our second and third radical. That's our pattern for the call passive participle. Katul is the way we would use katal. Remember our general form of the verb, we use this kind of stand-in root, the root katal, which doesn't mean much. It means to kill, actually, but it's this super strong version of the root. So that's why it's used as what we call the paradigmatic root. But so again, this passive participle form is katul, long a, and then a long u in between the three radicals. All right, so let's just look at a couple of these in context. So mishpat, remember mishpat means justice. Shafat is that root that means to judge. Shofet means a judge. Mishpat means justice. And then katuv, we have our kaf, our tav, and our beit. And we have a long a under our first radical, and we have a long u in between our second and our third. Katav, the root, means to write. Katuv means written. So justice is written, or a written judgment, a judgment that is written. Mishpat can mean justice in general, but it often means an actual judgment, like a thing that someone judges in order to render justice. So katuv ba Torah. So here we have katuv, that same thing you saw above, so a written thing. But we have a ka stuck onto it, remember? But ka is a preposition. You can add prepositions to participles. You can stick them on the front. So remember, the preposition ka means like written ba Torah, in the Torah, according to, or like it is written in the Torah. This is from the book of Nehemiah, one of the first ever time that someone really kind of like uses the Torah to like try to find something. We'll get to that in Old Testament class later, but here, Baruch haba ba Shem Adonai. You've seen this before. I actually just read this a few minutes ago. Baruch, so blessed, haba, the one who comes, Bashem, in the name Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. From Psalm 118. You might be familiar with this from the New Testament. So here's we'll do a little bit of practice here with some participial forms. You don't have to do this part, but I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes of practice here. So molech, right? Our root malak, which means a king, or to rule or reign, right? So molech would be one who rules or one who reigns. So if we want to parse this, if I tell you to parse something, what I mean is to give all of the pieces of relevant grammatical information. So we'll start with the stem, or the verbal pattern, the stem being call. So we'll start with call. You only know call so far, so if I ask you to parse anything, I'm going to ask you to say call first. So call, and then we have, for participles, we have to say whether it's active or passive. Remember, active has a holum over the first radical. A passive has that long U vowel in between the second and third radicals. That's what really marks it. So this is a call active participle. And then MS, masculine singular. I tell you, gender and number matter here. So call active participle, masculine singular, and then give the root of malach. And then usually at the end, people give the English translation of the root, to reign. Notice that's like the root there, to reign. So another example here would be yotzeit. This is a little bit of a strange form because of the aleph in our third position, but remember the et ending. If you have an aleph in that third position, it just tends to disappear in terms of its sound. But the tav that's ended shows us that it's a feminine singular form. So this is a call active participle. We have a holum over our first radical. This is from yatsa, which means to go out or go forth. So yotzeit is the call active participle, feminine singular, of yatsa, to go forth. Another example here. This one looks very strange, I'll admit, but just sound it out and you'll get it, I think. Asuya. Asuya. Now, do you recognize any of these letters that would form a root? Like maybe the ayin and the sin, those are strong letters, so they won't go away. Then you have a yod that's made into a shurek. You have a vav made into a shurek and a yod that comes right after it, and then you have a hey at the end. Now just imagine, what if it's the ayin and the sin and then the hey together? Asa. Do you know that? I think you do, because asa means to do or make. That shurek that's stuck into the middle of the verb, that might be a passive marker. And what, in fact, you are looking at is a call passive participle, feminine singular, of asa, to do. Now, this is a weak verb. I didn't even show you how to do this. But what I do want to show you is that's how you go about trying to solve verbs that you don't even know yet, or forms that you don't even know yet. You're looking for a vowel marker that's going to kind of signify something to you. A holum over your first radical, a shurek, that is a long U stuck into the middle of your verb. Those are signs that are trying to tell you something. And then try to find your root. Try to find 3 letters. Or if you only have 2 letters, you got to kind of come up with another one. But try to imagine what letters would this be, right? What word would this be? Here's another weak root. Again, don't worry about this, but just if you come across this, bonim, you have an eem ending, that's plural. You have a holum over your first radical. Well, that's kind of interesting there. You don't know this yet, but there's a verb bana, which means to build. It's a third hey. The hey disappears when you add the ending. I know you don't know that yet, but just follow with me here. I see the holum over my first radical. I see the masculine plural ending. I can get that that's a call active participle, masculine plural. I can get all that right even if I'd never seen this root before. So this is the root bana, which means to build. Ba'im. This is another one of those where I look at this and I wouldn't even necessarily know this is a participle, but I'm just telling you for future reference, this is what the call active participle of a middle weak form looks like. So bo, to come in, to enter, right? So this is ones who are entering. This is a call active participle, masculine plural, of bo, to enter. But just notice how we are parsing, what parsing means. Parsing means naming all these different parts of the verb, to give all the information about the verb that we can give. Ahuva. So ahav means to love. Ahuva, take a look at that interesting form here. You have a shurek stuck in, a long U stuck in between your second and third radical for ahav. That looks to be passive, right? And in fact, this is a call passive participle. This is a feminine singular form. This is a strange feminine singular form. They're supposed to have a top at the end, right? Kind of like yotzeit up here above. That's typical for this is an anomalous form of this verb here. But a kamatse stuck on, it's feminine, right? So all to say, you can even use the tools and the skills that you've learned so far to try to suss out what some of these strange forms of Hebrew words are that you're coming into contact with. So in the translations that you have, even those verbs that they're going to show you, they're going to try to give you the information for, see if you can just guess what it is, or figure out, kind of, even if you know the conclusion, you know the end, you know what it actually is because they gave it to you. See if you can figure out how they got there. The more that you get used to kind of taking things apart and holding some of these rules a bit lightly, because Hebrew does what it wants, but it does follow generally some rules or conventions, and there are some strange but somewhat predictable variations to those rules, like you see here at the bottom. So I don't mean to make you worried or upset, but if you're going to remember something from today, remember molech, yeah? And remember, you can add these endings like im and ot, these noun endings, to these participles. The active participles are much more common in the Bible than passive participles, so if you're going to focus your attention somewhere, that's a good place to focus. Okay, next we're going to turn to infinitives. Like if I say, I want to go. To go is the infinitive form. So we're going to learn how to do that in Hebrew next.